They didn't even flinch when I came home. No banners, no welcome back, not even a chair left for me at the dinner table. My father, Richard Parker, stood in the doorway. He looked me over like I was a stranger asking for a place to stay. His eyes held no anger, just a cold kind of distance I couldn't cross. My mother, Marianne, kept glancing at her phone. She was too busy telling a neighbor how proud she was of Lauren, how her youngest had married an army intelligence officer. I stood there in civilian clothes that felt like a disguise. My boots still carried sand from the place no one here wanted to hear about. No one asked why I'd been gone so long. No one asked what it cost me to come back alive. They all just carried on like I was never part of their story. That night, I slept in the garage. My old bedroom was packed with boxes of Lauren's wedding decorations. The air smelled like lemon polish and coal dust. I lay on a thin cot beside a stack of folded flags no one spoke about anymore. I could hear laughter drifting in from the kitchen, my mother's voice rising full of pride for the perfect daughter, Lauren's name repeated like a hymn. I closed my eyes and tried to remember when this house still felt like home, when Richard used to lift me onto his shoulders after drills in the yard, when Marianne brushed dirt off my knees instead of pretending I wasn't there. But memories fade faster than people. In that moment, I knew something simple and sharp I hadn't been forgotten. I'd been erased. In the morning, I stood at the kitchen doorway. Lauren was there in her crisp, white uniform, a perfect mirror of everything I'd never been allowed to be. She smiled for a photo sunlight catching the medals on her chest. Someone asked about me. Lauren tilted her head, voice sweet but hollow. Oh, Evelyn. She used to serve. Didn't finish, though. She does something overseas now. Yoga or aid work, I think. A few polite chuckles. No one looked my way. I felt the words press against my ribs like a dull blade. I had walked into fire zones. I had carried men heavier than me. I had disabled bombs with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. But here I was, nothing more than a faded rumor, a quitter they didn't even bother to hate. After breakfast, I walked outside to clear my head. The driveway felt smaller than I remembered. The old flagpole still stood tall, but it looked tired like everything else here. I traced a finger over the brass plaque by the porch. Lieutenant R. Parker. My father's name polished clean. No trace that I'd ever worn a uniform of my own. 10 years gone. 10 years of silence. I had thought maybe coming back would feel like closure. Instead, it felt like stepping into a museum where every display forgot my face. My heart thumped steady, but hollow. I turned back to the house, gripping the handle of my suitcase. It hit me then, this wasn't my home anymore. It was just the place I left behind so I could become someone they'd never recognize. That evening, the engagement party filled every room. Neighbors, old Navy friends, strangers I didn't remember. All of them pressing close to congratulate Lauren. I stood alone by the catering table, pretending to be busy with a glass of water. Someone brushed past me, murmuring how proud Richard must be, how Marianne had raised such a dedicated daughter. I didn't correct them. I didn't say I had been first, that I'd signed papers at 18 no one was allowed to see. The noise swelled bright and hollow. My name never spoken once. I looked across the crowd and felt something loosen in my chest. It wasn't anger, not even sadness, just the quiet acceptance that I was a ghost in my own house. And no one here missed me enough to notice. Near the end of the night, the front door swung open. A man in full dress uniform stepped inside, broad shoulders, medals bright under the hallway light. Colonel Marcus Ellsworth. The last time I'd seen him, we were crawling through sewage tunnels in northern Iraq. His eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on me. He stopped like he'd seen something he thought was gone forever. The room kept talking, oblivious. Marcus walked forward, steady and sure. He raised his hand in a crisp salute. "Ma'am, SEAL Commander." Every sound died at once. Forks froze midair. Lauren's smile collapsed. My father stared at me like he was trying to remember who I was. I didn't move, just nodded small and tired. The truth was out, and no one could pretend anymore. Silence stretched across the room, heavy as a storm. My mother's phone slipped from her hand and cracked against the tile. Lauren looked at the floor, cheeks pale. Marcus lowered his salute and stepped back without another word. He didn't need to explain. The damage was done. I felt every gaze on my skin, some curious, some afraid. I wasn't a rumor now. I was proof. Proof that I hadn't disappeared because I was weak. Proof that I had chosen a path no one here could ever understand. The party limped forward in forced conversation. I set my glass down and walked outside into the warm night. For the first time in years, I let myself breathe without shame. I drove back to the base motel in silence. The small room smelled of old carpet and cheap soap. I dropped my bag by the door and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor until my eyes blurred. Memories pressed in sharp and uninvited. The nights in a desert compound. The names I could never say out loud. I powered on the encrypted laptop hidden in a false-bottomed case. My hands moved without thinking. Years of habit never fully forgotten. One message blinked on the screen. Encrypted. Internal Pentagon channel. I clicked it open. My chest went cold. Lauren's name. She had accessed a classified archive storm hatch. A part of me wanted to believe it was a mistake, but deep down I knew curiosity had never been harmless. I read the message 3 times, hoping the words would change. Storm hatch. The mission no one was ever supposed to mention. Lauren's clearance shouldn't have reached that far. She must have tripped something buried so deep most generals didn't know it existed. I closed the laptop, my hands trembling. In that moment, it didn't matter if she meant well. Her curiosity had cracked open a vault I'd spent my whole life locking shut. I stood and paced the narrow room, the old floor creaking under my boots. All those years I thought I was safe in my silence, but secrets have a way of crawling back into daylight, and now someone out there knew exactly where to find me. I didn't wait for morning. I drove straight to my parents' house, parking down the block to avoid the front cameras. The porch light was still on. A moth circled the bulb in lazy loops. I knocked twice, firm but calm. Lauren opened the door, her hair loose, face tired. She looked younger without her uniform. "Evelyn," she whispered. We didn't speak. We just walked to the back porch where the night felt safer. I kept my voice low. "You wanted to write about forgotten women," I said. "But do you even know whose name you dragged into the light?" Her mouth opened, but no words came. For the first time, she looked like she understood the weight of what she'd done. "I didn't mean to, Lauren," said finally, her voice breaking. "I was researching for my paper." The system opened a folder I'd never seen, her hands twisted in her sleeves. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "It was locked for a reason," I told her. "I didn't publish anything," she said quickly. "I swear. I didn't know it would trigger a protocol." I believed her. That was the worst part. She had always been too curious, too sure the rules didn't apply to her. I felt something old and tired settle in my chest. "You don't get to be careless," I said quietly. "Not with lives you can't even imagine." Lauren's eyes shone, but she didn't cry. She just nodded, small and ashamed. I left without another word. Back at the motel, I sat at the desk, staring at the blackout curtains. The laptop glowed in the dark. I powered it on again, needing to be sure. A new message waited in the secure inbox. Red flag protocol. The subject line was one word: Nightshade. I felt my pulse in my throat. Nightshade wasn't a routine operation. It was a Tier 1 mission, the kind that never made it into official records. I read the orders slowly. I wasn't being asked to advise. I was being called to lead. 15 years after Storm Hatch, they still hadn't found someone to replace me. Morning came too fast. I drove to Fort Sentinel in a borrowed car, the sun bleeding across the highway. At the gate, a young Marine checked my ID twice. His eyes flicked to the service record. He didn't say anything, but he looked longer than most. Inside the briefing hall, rows of uniforms shifted when I entered. Some faces were curious, others wary. At the far end sat Colonel Robert Sloan. He watched me with a smile too smooth to trust. A man stepped forward, tall and rigid. "Lieutenant Aaron Blake." "You're Evelyn Parker," he asked, disbelief in his voice. I nodded once. He crossed his arms. "I was told I'd be leading this mission." "Then you were told wrong," I said. Blake's jaw tightened. "No offense, Commander," he said, voice flat, "but I don't take orders from a legend whose record doesn't exist." Around us, the room went still. I felt every stare, waiting to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. "Command isn't about stories," I told him. "It's about bringing people home." He didn't reply, just looked past me like I was already gone. Colonel Sloan cleared his throat, pretending to smooth the tension. "Let's proceed," he said. "Time is limited." I sat at the head of the table, the mission file heavy in my hands. In the silence that followed, I could almost hear the old ghosts breathing. Storm Hatch, Nightshade, the past refusing to stay buried. That night, I stayed alone in the mission tent. The operation maps lay spread across the table edges, curling from the desert heat. 7 exit routes, 3 blind drop zones, 1,000 ways to fail. I studied each line until the numbers blurred. Somewhere beyond the canvas walls, Blake was telling the others I wasn't fit to lead. I didn't blame him. Stories had a way of growing wild when no one ever bothered to tell the truth. I closed my eyes and saw the alley in Syria, the broken walls, the child clinging to a man's leg. The day I chose life over orders. I hadn't regretted it then, I didn't regret it now, but I knew this mission would be my last chance to prove why. Before dawn, we moved out to the training range, a live fire simulation, the first real test of trust. I outlined a pincer sweep to clear the canyon perimeter, every detail mapped and rehearsed. Blake stood to my left, arms crossed, gaze locked on the terrain. When the signal sounded, he broke formation without a word. Redirected half the unit up the ridge, ignoring protocol. Within minutes, the simulation collapsed. The flank was exposed. Simulated casualties hit 80%. No one spoke when the drill ended. I felt every doubt tighten around me like a vice. Back in the debrief, no one blamed Blake outright. It was all miscommunication interpretation. But I saw the truth in their eyes. They wondered if the legend was just a story after all. That evening, Colonel Sloan found me alone by the comms tent. He poured himself black coffee like we were old friends. "I don't need you to fail," he said softly. "I just need you to fade out quietly. Let someone else finish your story." I watched him for a long moment. "You think I came back for applause?" I asked. He didn't answer. "You think I stayed alive this long just to be tolerated?" Still nothing. I stepped closer, my voice low and even. "If you become collateral, Colonel, don't expect a medal." His smile faded just a flicker. I turned and walked away, my boots crunching in the sand. In that moment, I felt more alive than I had in years. At sunrise, I gathered the team in the warehouse. No screens, no ranks, just the truth. 6 went into Storm Hatch. 4 came out. No report ever explained why. I told them we survived because we trusted each other, not because someone barked orders from a safe distance. Some looked down unsure. Mason Grant and Erica Hayes watched me without blinking, but Blake stood apart, arms crossed, jaw tight. "I don't need war stories," he said. "I need a plan to get out alive." I didn't flinch. I pulled up the 3D render of the district in Yemen. Rooftops, alleys, fallback corridors, every route calculated, every risk named. When I looked up, the room was quiet. For the first time, they were listening. Hours before deployment, the leak hit. An anonymous blog posted a headline in bold red letters. "Commander Parker led SEALs to death, doing it again with Nightshade." The words scrolled across the break room screen, bright and merciless. No source cited, no proof, just enough poison to rot the air between us. I stared at it once, then turned to the team. "We're not at war with journalists," I said. "We're at war with the people planning to kill American soldiers in 72 hours. But I saw the shift. Trust so thin, already bleeding out on the floor. Blake didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His silence said everything. Colonel Sloan moved fast. He called in a remote directive voice smooth over the secure line. "Operation Nightshade is suspended pending further review." I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. If this mission died here, every risk we'd taken would mean nothing. I stared into the camera, my voice steady. "If you want more paperwork, you'll get it after I bring my team home." Sloane's eyes narrowed. I didn't wait for him to answer. I invoked tactical autonomy buried deep in the authorization protocol. I had the right to override. I did it without hesitation. When the screen went black, the room stayed silent. No applause, no protest, just the quiet knowledge that we were going in. The transport plane lifted off before dawn. No one spoke as we strapped in. Dust clung to our boots, the air thick with things unsaid. Blake sat across from me, hands resting on his knees. After a while, he looked up. "I never trusted anyone without a badge on their shoulder," he said quietly. "But today, I'll play my role. I didn't say thank you. I didn't need to. Sometimes trust isn't built in words. It's forged in the choice to stand beside someone when every doubt says to walk away." Outside the window, the desert spread endless and silent. We were finally on the same side, and we were running out of time. We touched down near Al Mazra. Just before sunrise, the town looked almost peaceful from a distance. Low rooftops, dusty alleys, but every shadow held something waiting to kill us. I split the unit into 3 teams. I would lead the northern breach. Blake took infiltration on comms and jammers. Mason and Erica guarded the rear with data sweep. We moved fast weapons, low hearts, steady. The mission was clear. Find the relay triggering the bomb network. Capture their field commander alive. No civilians harmed. No noise we couldn't control. The only way out was forward. And if we failed, no one would come looking. Some missions always end in silence, but this time, I refused to disappear. We slipped through the southern alleys, boots whispering over broken stone. Static flared in my comms, sharp as a slap, then Hayes' voice ragged. Ambush. West sector. They're everywhere. I checked my map. The alleys she described weren't on any satellite scan. Someone had doctored the intel. I felt it in my gut, Sloane's hand behind the curtain. A trap laid with perfect precision. Blake's voice cut in, strained and urgent. Commander, we're boxed in, 3 wounded, 8 minutes or we're done. I didn't hesitate. We'd trained for every failure but this. But no plan survives first contact. I knew one thing, I wasn't leaving them to die in that alley. I yanked the map into my hands, scanning for anything we could use. No clean routes, no easy exits. I reallocated teams, issued false comms traffic on enemy frequencies. Smoke grenades, diversion fire. 30 seconds later, everything changed. I broke protocol and led the flanking team myself. If they were going down, I would be there beside them. We moved fast and close, breath ragged in the masks. Enemy fire ripped through the walls, spraying dust into the dark. Hayes took point, bleeding from her arm. Blake was propped against the rubble, too pale. I hauled him over my shoulder without a word. This wasn't heroism. This was survival the only way I knew it. We found the doorway half buried in collapsed stone. A tunnel ran below, cold air seeping up like a warning. Hayes looked at me, breath shaky. Commander? That's the relay hub. I nodded once. The countdown on the device glowed red. 15 minutes. Blake tried to stand but sagged against the wall. Don't go alone, he rasped. I squeezed his shoulder just for a moment. I'm not dying in this hole, I said. I stepped into the darkness, boots crunching over wire and debris. Each breath tasted like rust. I didn't think about the headlines or the doubt waiting back home. All I thought about was ending this once and for all. The chamber was small, lit by a single hanging bulb. 3 servers hummed along the far wall. At the center, the bomb relay system pulsed with steady light. 12 minutes left. I knelt by the control node, prying open the casing with careful hands. My fingers moved on instinct. Memory from a life no one believed I'd lived. I twisted 2 wires loose. The screen flickered. A voice crackled through the relay. Manual override confirmed. Last access 2011. Operation Storm Hatch. The past had followed me all the way here. I pulled the master circuit at 1 minute, 9 seconds. Everything went black. When I stepped back into the tunnel, no one spoke. Not because they didn't care. Because they finally understood. Back at the extraction point, the air felt thinner. Blake sat propped against a crate, his face pale but steady. When I passed him, he lifted his uninjured arm in a slow salute. Commander, he said, voice rough, I'm sorry I doubted you. I didn't smile. I just nodded, feeling something settle behind my ribs. The helicopter lifted off dust, spiraling under the blades. No one spoke on the flight home. We didn't need words. Sometimes survival is the only proof you have. Outside the window, the desert turned gold in the dawn. Storm Hatch was no longer just a ghost story. It was the reason we were all still breathing. They summoned me to the Pentagon 2 days later. The briefing hall smelled of polished wood and old secrets. Rows of officers watched me file in, some curious, some hostile. Colonel Sloan sat dead center, hands folded like he'd already won. They asked me to report on Nightshade. I stood tall in full uniform, my voice clear. I described the doctored satellite images, the ambush, the sabotage. Then I pulled up the logs, raw data, not summaries. This is the access trail, I said. It traces back to a terminal registered to Colonel Robert Sloan. A ripple went through the room. Sloan's mouth tightened, but he didn't speak. For the first time, I knew he was afraid. The doors opened behind me. I turned as Lauren walked in, her steps careful but sure. She wore no uniform, just a plain suit and a badge in her hand. My name is Lauren Parker, she said, voice steady. I accessed the Storm Hatch files. I did it without understanding what they were. A pause, but I also traced the intrusion that altered our mission data. She plugged a small drive into the console. Firewall logs flickered onto the screen. Her voice didn't shake. This code pattern matches Colonel Sloane's credentials, she said. No one interrupted. For the first time, my sister was standing on my side. Sloane finally rose from his chair, face red with fury. This is a farce, he snapped. She's not even real, just a story they created to clean up a failed operation. A commissioner stood, a woman with iron gray hair. She read from a folder, her tone even. 12 Black Ops missions, no casualties under her direct command. Commander Evelyn Parker has never failed. She has only been kept invisible. Sloane didn't speak again. By afternoon, he was relieved of duty. A quiet end for a man who tried to bury the truth. As for me, they handed back my service record. My name no longer erased. My past no longer denied. When I walked out of the Pentagon, the sun felt too bright. Reporters crowded the steps, cameras flashing like lightning. Someone shouted my name. Commander Parker, what's it like to finally be recognized? I paused, feeling the weight of every year spent in shadow. I thought of the women I'd served with, the ones who never made it home. I thought of the nights I'd wondered if any of it mattered. I met the reporter's gaze and spoke softly. I never left, I said. I was always here, waiting for the world to open its eyes. Then I kept walking past the microphones into the light I'd earned. The community hall in Jacksonville hadn't changed. Same creaky floors, same folding chairs lined up in uneven rows. But this time, the people inside weren't here to gossip or judge. They were here to listen. Lauren stood at the podium first. Her voice was clear, carrying to the back wall. I used to think my sister disappeared because she gave up, she said. A hush fell over the crowd, but now I know she's the only one who never did. Behind her, a photo lit the projector screen. Me in the desert helmet, off, eyes steady. No name printed, just the truth finally visible. When Lauren stepped down, I walked to the front. Every chair faced me now, no place left to hide. Richard stood in the back, hands clasped behind his back. He looked older than I remembered. Slowly, he came forward and stopped in front of me. No salute, no speech, just his hand reaching out. You did what I never dared, he said, voice low. And I'm sorry for not seeing you. I took his hand. For the first time in my life, I felt something ease between us. A simple recognition. I had never needed their pride, just their honesty. My mother joined him. Her eyes wet but steady. She reached up and touched my cheek like she was making sure I was real. I'm sorry I never asked, she whispered. I didn't answer right away. There was nothing left to prove. I let the silence hold us together. Then a little girl stepped out from the crowd. She clutched her father's dog tags tight in her small hand. She looked up at me, her voice soft but certain. I want to grow up like you, she said. Brave, but quiet. My throat closed. I knelt so we were eye to eye. You already are, I told her. I stood and faced the room one last time. No uniform, just a gray shirt and the coil of red wire from the bomb in my hand. I took a slow breath, feeling the weight of it all settle into place. I used to think being forgotten was the worst I began. Heads lifted listening. But it's not. The worst is being invisible to the people you love, wondering if you ever mattered in their story. I paused, letting the words fill the quiet. And when you're finally seen again, it's not about apologies. It's about being ready when they're ready to understand. The hush that followed felt deeper than any applause. I looked down at the wire in my hand. A scrap of the life they once tried to erase. I held it up so everyone could see. This isn't a trophy, I said. It's just proof that the past doesn't disappear because you pretend it never happened. A woman in the third row wiped her eyes. Someone else nodded silent. I lowered my hand and let the wire rest on the podium. If my story means something to you, I said, voice steady. If you've ever felt invisible or underestimated, I let my gaze move across every face. Don't stay quiet. Share this. Make sure no one has to wonder if they mattered. I stepped down from the stage, feeling the air shift around me. People stood row by row, hands coming together in quiet applause. Not loud, not forced, just honest. At the back, Lauren waited by the exit. She didn't say anything when I reached her, She just slipped her hand into mine, her grip warm and sure. For the first time, it felt like we were standing on the same ground, side by side, not divided by secrets or silence. I looked back once. The photo on the screen still glowed in the dim hall. Not every hero wears a uniform. Some are just people who refuse to disappear. Outside, the sky was soft with evening light. I walked to the edge of the parking lot and looked up. The flag on the old pole lifted in the breeze. For years, I thought I had to choose between the life I lived and the life they accepted. But maybe the truth was simpler. I was both. The soldier and the sister. The fighter and the ghost. I slipped the coil of red wire into my pocket, feeling its weight settle against my leg. Proof that survival isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet and stubborn. Sometimes it's just standing here still breathing. I turned back to the hall one last time. People were drifting out in small groups, voices hushed and thoughtful. Lauren was talking with a reporter, her shoulders squared, no shame in her eyes. Richard stood alone by the door watching me. He raised a hand, a small gesture, but it felt like a bridge we'd both waited years to cross. I lifted mine in return. No ceremony, no titles. Just a quiet understanding that some stories never needed permission to exist. When I finally walked away, it wasn't an ending. It was a beginning I hadn't dared to hope for. And it felt exactly right. Segment 4040. I reached my car and paused with my hand on the door. The evening breeze carried voices behind me, soft and full of something like grace. For so long, I believed my story was too complicated to tell, too heavy for anyone to carry. But standing there, I knew better. I glanced at the camera, waiting on the seat, the red light blinking. I pressed record, my voice steady and low. If you've ever been underestimated, erased, or forced to stand alone, I let the silence fill the space between each word. Don't walk away quiet. Share this. Speak up. There are more names waiting to be seen. Before you go, I'd love to hear what this story meant to you. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Your voice matters here. And if you want to follow more stories of resilience and quiet courage, hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Thank you for listening.